Let's finally have the first base conversation. All right, we'll do that and more all today on Locked On Tigers.
You are Locked On Tigers, your daily Detroit Tigers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Tigers. I'm, of course, your host, Scott Bentley. Today is Monday, November 18th, 2024. Thank you so much for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off of your first purchase. Welcome in, everybody. Hope you all had a fantastic weekend. Happy Monday to everybody. So today we're going to finally have, and I say finally, literally, finally have the conversation surrounding Spencer Torkelson and first base. Tork will be one of the last player breakdowns we do in regards to the 2024 season. And the reason why it is finally, and the reason why it took so long to get to this conversation, and why I was, when I game planned and mapped out the winter and the off season for what I was going to talk about each day, that this one was toward the end, if not at the very end, of the player breakdown conversation or segment, whatever you want to call it, portion of the offseason, was not as much I don't even view this as super controversial. I think most people are in the boat that some sort of action needs to be taken at first, whether that's a backup or spending $200 million. That can be discussed until we're blue in the face, and we'll do plenty of that today. But it's not even really like the controversy of the position. I just think this is kind of the exclamation point that can transition us into talking about 2024, talking about it really does kind of encapsulate where the Tigers are at as a whole, I think, right? And it can kind of transition us into review and talking about what was and what the 2024 season was, and transition us into talking about the 2025 season and the off season, and what needs to be done still. And we've obviously had plenty of conversations already about what needs to be done and whatnot. I'm not saying that, obviously we've had plenty of those talks already, but I think that this is really just a good exclamation point to the finality that is, breaking down a lot of these players' 2024 campaigns. And we'll still, obviously, it's the most recent season. We'll still talk plenty about 2024. That's our reference point for a lot of these conversations. But first base is weird. And when talking about what first base is going to be for the Tigers in 2025, we have to start off with what is currently on the Detroit Tigers roster, and that is obviously Spencer Torkelson. Tork was demoted mid-season and had an OPS in the 500s at the halfway mark in the campaign. It wasn't all bad. There were some signs of life. This wasn't like the worst hitter any of us have ever seen or anything like that. And he did improve in other areas, and I want to give him his credit and give him his flowers in those, because I don't want this to be just like everything was terrible, right? Like this is analysis, and like he was a lot better defensively, objectively, worlds better. In 2023, he was legitimately one of the worst defensive first basemen in baseball, and you probably could have made an argument he was the worst everyday first baseman defensively in baseball. Obviously, he had a 30 home run season, so it wasn't the same case at the plate. But on the defensive side of the ball, we were like, oh my goodness, like this dude's we drafted a DH 1-1. So for him to take the strides he did defensively, I think was really impressive. And he maintained his ability to scoop, which was pretty much the only thing he was good at defensively in 2023. He also isn't a slouch on the bases, which is one of the reasons why he was drafted as a third baseman, and one of the reasons, which was always ridiculous. I'm not trying to justify that. That was always hilariously stupid. But why he was technically drafted as a third baseman and why people were more okay taking him at the top was because not only could he hit, but he was actually a pretty darn good athlete. And he was pretty athletic for being like a power hitting first baseman. The stereotype surrounding them is, this like giant, Prince Fielder, right? Like that's what people, the physique and the type of athlete that people think of. And Prince Fielder was kind of an underrated athlete, to be completely honest with you. But you get my point. Like that's kind of what people think. Like slow, bad defense, not an athlete, like only gets his value via home runs. And the Tigers like, oh, like this dude could maybe be a really good plus defender at first base, or third, which was always, again, dumb, first base, and he won't be a slouch on the bases and whatever. And obviously, again, we'll get to kind of the bumps and bruises along the way here. This season, he also hit lefties pretty well. He had an OPS just under 800 against left-handed pitching, and that's over the course of the full season. That's not even just from like being recalled through the end of the year. That is opening day to game 162. His OPS was almost 800 against lefties, which is a pretty darn respectable number. That is well over league average in terms of offensive output. In August, he also had an OPS of just about 950 and a batting average over 300. So was really seeing the ball well in the month of August. Went through a stretch where he was hitting sliders really well, which I think was nice. His whiff rate on sliders was over 30%. It wasn't super low, so he still swung and missed plenty. But when he did connect, he was actually doing a decent amount of damage against sliders and had some success against breaking balls at times. That one wasn't to start to finish. That was kind of a nebs and flow of the season type of thing. After that is where the positives pretty much stop. And that's not to say like he didn't do anything else right the rest of the year, but on a general scale, on a macro scale, that's kind of where the positives stop for Torkelson in 2024. Every other month outside of August was a struggle, sub 700 OPS. We're talking every single other month of the year. And unfortunately, that includes September. Like you, at first, when you look at his first half, second half splits, you go, oh my goodness, like he had an OPS over 800 in the second half. Like if we can just carry that over into next season, which by the way is the exact same thing we said in 2023. But even aside from that point, it's really just 1 month where he was, pushing 1,000 OPS. September was kind of right back to the well of what we had seen from him the rest of the season. And even in the postseason, that reared its ugly head. He didn't get a hit for his first, whatever it was, 10, 15 at-bats in the postseason. And then obviously we have one of the bigger talking points surrounding Torque so far in his career has just been the lack of clutch hitting. He had a 187 batting average with a 540 OPS with runners in scoring position this year. That is absolutely brutal. Now, when taking a little bit more of a deep dive, we can kind of dissect specifically when it comes to pitch type and pitch recognition, what he struggled at and what he still needs to improve on, what he did do well at, etc. We will do all of that right after this. Got to talk to you today about our friends over at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle rather than take the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place your bets on the NFL, all in one place. Goodness. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place all of your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Segment 2 of Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in. As always, making us your first listen every single day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. We will, of course, be back tomorrow. Tomorrow's show, we are going to preview the Rule 5 deadline, which is Tuesday at 6 p.m. By Tuesday, the Tigers have to protect and add to the 40-man roster everybody that is eligible for the Rule 5 draft, and those who are not protected and not added to the 40-man roster by that Tuesday deadline will be eligible for the Rule 5 draft during winter meetings in December. So we're going to preview that, talk about everybody who's eligible, what we think could happen, and then obviously on Wednesday, recap what ended up happening. Today, though, we are talking about Spencer Torkelson and really about the first base position as a whole. You know, we talked about kind of the underlying numbers, the baseline numbers and whatnot. Last year, 2023, Torkelson hit fastballs pretty well. He had over 270 against fastballs and had 17 of his 30-plus home runs off of all different variations of fastballs. This year, he hit 220 with 5 home runs off of all variations of heaters. His slugging percentage against all fastballs was 374. You're talking about like Harold Castro slugging percentages when you get, below 380. Another pitch that he has struggled with significantly is changeups. And the reason I bring up changeups is because that has not been a one-year centric thing. That has been his entire career. His whole career, he struggled against changeups, and this year was the worst of it. This season in 2024, he hit 098, I believe, against off-speed pitches against changeups this year. So the fastball thing is interesting because when he first got called up, it was in 2022. It was, oh my goodness, he can't catch up to fastballs, but just wait until he does. Once he gets his timing down, he'll be fine. And the first half of 2023, the timing still wasn't there. He still wasn't hitting fastballs very well. Then in the second half of 2023, he was all over him, and he was crushing the baseball, and he went on the huge tear in August, and he ended up with over 30 home runs. And we thought, okay, he found it. Sigh of relief. Thank goodness. This year, we were right back to the beginning. He, for the majority of the season, really struggled with just not even like I'm not even talking about hitting home runs and hitting the ball 500 feet, like literally just hitting fastballs to the pull side of the field, like just being on time, period. I don't care if it's a ground ball or not, on fastballs. A lot of other pitches were obviously the pop out issue has been a thing for a majority of his career, and in this year was egregious. He was almost double the league average in pop-out rate this year. League average in pop-out rate any given year is usually around 7%, give or take maybe 0.5%. He was pushing 14. It was like 13.5 or 13.8. And I get asked about Torkelson at this point probably more than anything, like not consistently throughout my entire tenure as the host of this show, but definitely like of recent memory over the last probably 6 months. There's more questions about Torque than any other question I get asked. At one point it was Erod, and then it was Javi, and that, like it just there's always something that everybody wants to learn more about and know more about. I want to know more about Torkelson too. I want to know what's coming. And when I think about 2025, my stance on first base is we have not seen enough good and enough positives in the entire career. I'm not even talking about just 2024, the entire career of Torkelson to justify him being the 162 game starter at first base next year. And that's not to say that he still can't become that eventually. Heck, he might even become that at some point in 2025. I'm not just like giving up on him forever. I still believe, and some people scoff at this, I still believe there is a good hitter in there. I really do. But in the short term, in 2025, when you are building your roster, I don't know how you can justify not addressing first base in any capacity. If you have a lot more faith in Torque than I do, and it's like, you know what, we're just gonna bring in somebody who, kind of safety valve if we really need to, can play first, but he's still gonna get a majority. Or if you're gonna spend 200 mil on Pete Alonso, or obviously anything in between, something needs to be addressed at first base. You cannot just set it and forget it and do absolutely nothing there. So let's talk about some of those possibilities. We'll start with free agency. I think the big two are Christian Walker and Pete Alonso. Christian Walker is 33 years old and is one of the better first basemen in the game of I almost said basketball. That was wild. Hey, goodness. Got maybe the Pistons on the brain. Nice little year for the Stones so far. In 2022 and 2023, Christian Walker put up 4 WAR seasons at first base, which is very impressive to do. If you know how WAR is calculated, non-premier defensive positions take a hit when it comes to just the calculation of WAR, and first base probably more so than any other position, right? Positional adjustments really hit that hard in that stat, which is again why WAR is not like gospel and shouldn't be the only thing you look at. But putting up back-to-back 4-win seasons from first base, I think, is unbelievably impressive. A couple of 30 home run seasons there as well. This year took a little bit of a step back in production, was still a 3-win player, but the offense took a little bit. He still had an OPS over 800, still had 25 plus home runs. I'm not trying to like scare anybody away from Christian Walker, but the numbers objectively took a little bit of a step back this year. And at 33 years old and playing first base, I think that's enough to bring up. Does that mean if the Tigers sign Christian Walker tomorrow that I would be upset? Absolutely not. I just don't think you can sign him to a long-term deal. I think Christian Walker, you're talking 2. I think 3 is probably the longest contract I would give him, legitimately. If he's asking for 4 more years, I think I would probably start looking elsewhere. And that's really sad because Christian Walker is one of my favorite players in baseball, and I absolutely love watching him play. He's also an incredible defender, which is something that this team hasn't had at first base in, I don't know, my lifetime. Like even prime Miguel Cabrera wasn't like ever a Gold Glover over at first base. So he's a phenomenal defender. He's a great hitter. You're talking about a guy that would immediately become one of the best players on the team. And that is why if the Tigers went that direction, obviously I would be in favor of it, and I think that most people probably would and should. The other big name is Pete Alonso. Alonso isn't as, I'll say, well-rounded as Christian Walker. Christian Walker is just kind of pretty good at everything, and it makes a pretty darn good baseball player. Pete Alonso had a really bad year defensively. He is never going to be a super high batting average guy, although a few years ago he did hit over 270. But he hits bombs, and he is going to be one of the premier home run hitters in baseball year in and year out. On top of that, you also have the age factor, which I think comes into play more so in free agency probably than any other conversation, right? Like most free agents in baseball are in their early 30s because it takes 6 years of service time to become a free agent. That's why like Juan Soto is going to get $500 million, maybe more, right? Because he's still like 26, 25. Pete Alonso is 29 years old. Especially when you look at the first base market, that is way younger than most of the other guys we're talking about. And again, you're talking about a guy that could hit perennial like 35 plus. I think he hit 34 this year, 46 in 2023, and 40 in 2022. He's going to be toward the top of the league in home runs year in and year out. Now, he had a 788 OPS this year with 34 homers. That means that, that's not a perfect season. 2022, he had an 870 OPS, so he's capable. 820 OPS in 2023. But when you start 35 home runs and a below 800 OPS is a weird season. That's still not a ton of slug outside of home runs for him, which is, again, we're really splitting hairs here. I understand that. Some people are just going to look at it and go, I want one of the best power threats in baseball to be my first baseman, and I will not get in the way of that. And that is a very justifiable argument. He's probably going to be the most expensive first base option out there. Again, you're talking about a guy who could end up with 200 mil. I think that's not super outrageous. The Athletic has him projected at 189 million over 7 years. That's about 27, I want to say $27 million a year. Christian Walker is going to be, again, only 2 or 3 years and probably less AAV on top of that. The Athletic has Christian Walker at 3 years, 72 million. It's about 24. Yeah, 24 exactly. $1 million a year. So cheaper per year and fewer years for Walker. However, he's also 4 years older than Pete Alonso. So you're talking about the same date that the contract would end for both of them, as far as like their age being relative to the amount of years they're getting. So just things to keep in mind. And there's a few more options, like Anthony Rizzo's out there if you want to take a flyer on someone that didn't have a very good season this year. Carlos Santana is always going to be out there and be a viable option. He's going to be serviceable. My mindset, I mean, Paul Goldschmidt, heck, like definitely took a big step back this year, but like is still Paul Goldschmidt. Maybe you can find the fountain of youth there. I don't want to take a risk with anybody that I think bat speed might be an issue or catching up to fastballs might be an issue. We already played that game with Mark Hanna last year. My biggest thing with those guys, with Santana, Goldschmidt, and Rizzo, is like at that point, you might as well just see if Torkelson can find it. Like that's that, you know what I mean? Like that they would be marginally better, and Paul Goldschmidt might be way better. Like I don't know. Who knows what's his future in baseball is going to look like, just because he did have such a weird year where he was really struggled, and then he got really hot, and then he really struggled again. Like who knows what's going to happen? But when you start getting into the lower level of free agents, I would just almost prefer to just let Torkelson take the reins and see if you can get anything out of him. There are also trade possibilities. There's one very notable name out there in the trade market besides Lamont Wade Jr., for those who are anti that trade. Let's talk about Yandy Diaz. We'll do that right after this. Got to talk to you today about our friends over at GameTime. GameTime is the best, and they have a new feature called GameTime Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. GameTime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only the incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater. If it needs a ticket, odds are pretty darn good you can get it over at GameTime. They also have a lot of other great features that we talk about all the time here. All-in pricing. You can toggle this feature and it'll show your total up front. There's no surprise hidden fees at checkout or anything like that. You can also see a picture of your seat before you buy. And of course, as always, your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime Picks. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download GameTime today. What time is it? Game time. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Third and final segment of Locked On Tigers. Appreciate you all for tuning in as always. Talking about first base and what to do at first base going forward, specifically in the 2025 season. A lot of people in the fan base have started talking about Yandy Diaz because the Rays are weird and don't want to pay anyone. And Diaz has 1 year of control left, then has a club option for another year, and will not be a free agent until the 2027 season. So, Yandy Diaz, 33 years old, so the same age as Christian Walker. He crushes lefties. Always has, presumably will continue to throughout the rest of his major league career. His peripherals were also fantastic this year. He just couldn't lift the baseball, which was is kind of a, I don't want to say a new phenomenon. Like, it's been a thing for about a decade now, right? The whole launch angle conversation. And some people are very pro, those analytics and those underlying numbers and peripherals, and some people don't want to hear it. Diaz, a really good argument for those who do want to have that conversation and talk about it, because he crushes the baseball, hits it unbelievably hard. And this past year had a sub 800 OPS because his slugging percentage wasn't that good, even though he has some of the hardest hit rates in all of baseball. So a guy that definitely you want to try to work with him and have him get out of the baseball, but he's also 33 years old. How much are you going to, revolutionize Yandy Diaz's career and his swing and his bat path when you're talking about a guy in his mid-30s, right? And even if they don't, this is still a very productive and good baseball player. He received MVP votes in 2023. He was legitimately one of the best hitters in baseball, had an OPS over 900. Not very fast, not a great defender. You get him for his offense for sure. He doesn't strike out. He doesn't chase out of the zone either. The fit with him is very similar to the conversation with Christian Walker and Pete Alonso, which is if you get any of those three guys to play first base for you, he is your everyday starting first baseman. You are not bringing in any of those guys to then platoon with Torkelson. They're all righties, and they all hit lefties better than righties. Torkelson hits lefties better than righties. There is no platoon to be had with Walker, Alonso, or with Diaz. And I know Walker struggled against lefties a little bit, relatively speaking, this year, but throughout his career, he's almost always hit lefties very well. So an acquisition of Diaz wouldn't be a, coexisting with Torkelson situation. It would be a takeover of first base, which is fine if that's the camp that you're in, but that is the reality for any of those three guys. The conversation we had with Lamont Wade Jr. last week is much more of a coexisting conversation. Torkelson and Lamont Wade Jr. can both be on the roster. There's a little bit of flexibility with Lamont Wade Jr. to play corner outfield, albeit not very well. Righty lefty, the platoon splits, etc. So overall, what is the conclusion we're coming to here? I think there's three outcomes with first base in 2025. And this is very self-explanatory, okay? They're pretty much literally the only three options. You have Torkelson every day, and you just don't address first base very much at all. You have the platoon, where you bring someone in that can also play, 100 games, and the two of them will get their pinch hitting and whatnot, but they'll coexist at first base. Or you get one of the big names, and Torkelson does not play much in 2025. As I said earlier, I lean toward one of the two of the latter. I am not in the camp that you can just roll into next year with Torkelson and not address first base whatsoever. And I am pretty okay with the platoon, to be honest. I don't need you to spend $200 million on a first baseman either. I think there's better allocation of resources than that. Now, would I be mad if you had one of the best home run hitters in baseball in the middle of your lineup? Obviously not. Okay, I don't want that to get twisted either. Illich can afford to drop big money on multiple positions. I promise he's doing fine. So obviously I would love that. But if there is a budget that ownership has given Harris, I don't think that completely makes it so that you just can't address anything in the offseason and this is just a wash and we're not going to do anything this winter. I think you have to address first base to some capacity, and you can do that also without giving up on your former number one overall pick at 25 years old, which I also, no matter where you stand on him, I'm not sure that's necessarily the best course of action either, given the fact that he hit 30 home runs just a season ago. So I lean toward the platoon, and again, that doesn't eliminate. Obviously, if you get better players, I'm going to be thrilled about it. But I think given the guidelines of what we want to accomplish this winter, where we want our money to go, where we want Illich's money to end up going, right? You still want a third baseman. We still want multiple starting pitchers. We still want multiple relievers, right? And I think that, and this is my I don't want to say rebuttal, but this is the comment that I have too. There were quite a few people that voiced their displeasure with Lamont Wade Jr. with that episode, talking about the possibility of Lamont Wade Jr. becoming a Tiger because it wasn't a big enough splash. If you do all of those other things and bring in Lamont Wade Jr., that softens the blow. At no point in that episode did I say that he should be the biggest acquisition, the biggest acquisition that the Tigers make this winter. That is not true. I said something similar with Mark Hanna last year. I was like, okay, I'm fine with this, but it better not be the headliner of the winter. And it kind of somewhat was on the offensive side of the ball. You get a platoon for Torkelson that is good and solid. You get a legitimate third baseman. You get a couple of legitimate starters, and you get a couple of legitimate swing and miss, high strikeout, good relievers. You're talking about a really exciting offseason. I'm not asking for again, $200 million contracts at every single position of need. I don't think that's very realistic given what we have seen from ownership over the last few years. And if you have an issue with that, I'm not going to get in the way of that conversation, right? I've been very critical of ownership since taking over this show. I agree with you. I'm in your corner. But you can't penny pinch and dumpster dive for all of your positional needs either. So whatever side of the aisle you're on, whatever the Tigers end up doing, you have to make it worth it. Thanks for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. We will, of course, be back tomorrow previewing the Rule 5 protection deadline where 40-man rosters have to be set by Tuesday. Be a fun next couple of days. Got a lot to talk about. All right. I don't think I have anything else to say, man. And Reed Torkelson, again, like even when he had the 30 home run season, his OPS was still comfortably under 800, right? Like that's not awesome, right? You know, like it's not awesome to be a 30 home run hitter and have a sub 800 OPS like comfortably. It's not like he was at like 798 either. So I think and again, it doesn't have to be Lamont Wade Jr. I'm not like this has to be the guy. All I'm saying is you can make a lot of bigger splashes than first base and still have a good season in 2025. I don't think this is the point I'll leave you with. You need to address it, but I don't think first base needs to be your biggest splash of the offseason either. But you do need to address it. All right. I will let you get on with your Monday. I appreciate you all greatly. Peace and love. Going to therapy's dope. I'll catch you all tomorrow, baby. Go Tigers.